Well, here we are once again, facing down the reality that it seems the Miraculous is allowing its momentum to dwindle. Should this be a surprise to anybody at this stage though? Probably not, because this is pretty much the standard MO of the franchise. No matter what they do and how good things get, they'll always be ready to blast you with a bucket of cold water to try to cool things off. It's really a mixture of things, isn't it? Sometimes it's the wacky scheduling that's going on, and then sometimes it's the dip in the actual writing quality, but you can be assured there will be something. They're masters at this sort of thing. Building something awesome and then squandering it all. Because to me, that's really what's happening right now. They're squandering it. How are they doing it? By having this absurdly long hiatus mid-season, which is just not what the Doctor ordered. I think, though, that we need some backstory, don't we? So I can really get into what I mean by all this. Our story begins way back at the start of Season 5. I think that it's very fair to say that this season was a major mixed bag looking back on it. A lot of good episodes and a lot of really good story developments which were counterbalanced by some terrible and baffling creative choices. For the good, there was quite a lot to enjoy. Lila's storyline was coming to a head, Gabe had a fairly interesting character arc where he got cataclysmed, which in turn was leading him to a slow death. However, this in turn leads to him start being nicer to Adrian and they start to bond more as father and son. Felix has a brief villain arc and then a romance with Kagami. Natalie's also dying and decides to give Gabe the middle finger before she goes, going out of her way to thwart his plans and give Adrian a bit of love before the end. The plot was getting thicker with the reveal that Tomoe had been working with Gabe all along behind the scenes. Adrianette set sail after years and years of waiting and we were coming to the end game of the story. Hell yeah! Yeah, along the way there were certainly narrative missteps, like Chloe once again having a full-on villain story when it was long overplayed and overdone, Andre the Mayor having a redemption arc for some reason, as if this was something that anybody was clamoring for, Andre the Ice Cream Man continuing to exist, Luca getting shipped off because he knows the true identities of both Ladybug and Cat Noir and thus is in danger. I mean, yeah, those weren't great, but I still think the story was once again building momentum and building hype. It probably helped that finales are always hype. That's what they were building to all these years, and we were going to get this epic payoff. It's going to be so amazing. Trust me, guys, it's going to be great. It's going to be absolute dog shit. That's what happened, sadly. They well and truly screwed the pooch with this one. Miracle Queen was less hated than this. Good God. They had a cool concept and a massive build, only to turn Adrian into a sad crybaby character who doesn't do anything at all, and who stays in prison whilst Plague goes to help Marinette, who then powers up and does all the fighting, and gets all the story. A bit of a yikes moment right there, and a spectacular pissing away of momentum. We then had an extremely long wait between the seasons, but in the meantime, the writing actually managed to start to get good again. Against the odds, I know. I figured it'd be a very slow build to recover from the ending of Season 5, and yet they put out two really good specials with Paris and London World, and then the 6th season made its debut. It had a new look, and there were so many haters at first, but I think by now we can acknowledge that the show looks a whole lot better than it ever did before. But it was more than just the look. The writing felt fresh and different. It somehow managed to take a really weird ending to Season 5 with Adrian being sidelined and it being the Ladybug show, and weaving that into an intriguing character piece that adds a whole lot of nuance to the narrative. It promises to have a really exciting payoff that could have long-lasting ramifications to the story going forward. They're setting Lila up to be a really imposing and competent villain who gets stuff done and feels a lot different to Gabe, even though she fills a very similar role. A really great reinvention of what had become a fairly tired story archetype. We're getting episodes that follow up on minor characters, giving them a heap of development in a short burst, whilst Marinette and Adrian are doing their thing too. It just feels like the writing's moved up a step. Yes, the episodes were out of order when they were coming out in some respect, and that can be frustrating. However, at the same time, they've managed to avoid too many big ramifications of that sort of thing, where they're using a character or a story point that we haven't seen before, but it's treated as no big deal because the story presumes you've seen it in a previous episode. It isn't the same context as Season 3 with Party Crasher where we got Kim's debut, but we also saw Luca and Max transform despite the fact that we hadn't seen Desperata or Star Train yet, and so it spoiled those episodes, which was a bit of a shame. We haven't seen that happen just yet, but at the same time we still have 18 episodes left to go, which means that there are lots of opportunities for that to happen. Here's to hoping it doesn't though. I do also remember that they said that for the majority of the season, the order of the episodes doesn't really matter that much. It's probably only a couple of scattered episodes and then the final stretch of the season that it matters more. If they have managed to make it work, good on them. Like I said though, Season 6 it started off with a bang. There were a hell of a lot of good episodes pushing the story forward and fleshing out characters at long last. Most importantly though, I think the fact that we were getting consistent episodes was a big boon. This is something the show's historically always been bad at. It's not always the fault of creators either, it's just sometimes how it is. Episodes coming out of order, and then sometimes big gaps between releases too. Now of course we've just addressed the out of order stuff previously, in that Season 6 is taking steps to prevent it having too much of an impact on the overall story. Here I want to talk more about gaps, and there were of course still gaps in Season 6's early days where they go for a while without an episode, but it was no worse than usual. We actually started off pretty damn strong. The first episode to release was Illustrator on the 24th of January, followed by Sublimation on the 31st. Where Papas came out on the 7th of February, followed closely by Daddy Cop on the 8th. We then had a much larger gap from here to the 21st of March when we saw the release of Revelator, and then another month went by for the next string of episodes. We had Climata Queen on the 16th of April, El Toro de Piedra on the 23rd, and then we got The Ruler on the 30th. After this, I was pretty optimistic about where the show was at. The story was engaging, and back to back they just dropped two of the best episodes of the show they've ever made, El Toro de Piedra and Ruler. Really deep and engaging content was being put out, and so the weeks went by, and we crossed over a month with no episode, which is rough, but hey, it happens. 2 months though was unusual, which then led to the reveal that we wouldn't be getting any more episodes until the autumn, which, yeah, nice. That's exactly what everyone wanted. We do have an end in sight, with an episode scheduled to come out on the 27th of September, but this has actually ended up being the longest mid-season hiatus in the history of the show's run. Plus, even when we do get this episode, there's also this fairly large risk that we'll simply have to face down another long wait until the next one comes out. I'm not really sure what's going on, but it's nothing good. For me personally, the Season 5 finale burned me out quite badly. Whilst there'd been dodgy writing at points all the way through Seasons 4 and 5, there'd also been a lot of good. Then we got to the finale and it was just bleh. That's all you can really say about it. Bleh. It's just no good. Nothing more needs to be said than that. They made a series of bad decisions that all cascaded together to end the Gabriel Agreste arc with a whimper. I won't go too much into it here because that's not what the video's about, but, you know, I don't know many people who found the Season 5 finale satisfying. So I was pretty checked out, but then the film was rather fun for what it was, whilst the Paris special felt really interesting and different. We had a bit of a longer gap after that, but I was back in a good mood thanks to that special. Then we came to the London special, and whilst the name was a bit of a misnomer, it was also a really fun story that set Lila up as an imposing villain that can go toe-to-toe with Marinette. She was a true threat, which was very refreshing after Gabe, who was more often than not presented as a bumbling clown. This in turn led into Season 6, which, like I said earlier, has in my eyes just been really good so far. It's been exactly what I wanted from the show for a very long time, and has shown a quality of writing that's a step above what we'd seen before. On top of that, visually it just looks so much better. I think that's why it's so frustrating that there's this massive gap. They're shooting their own momentum in the foot. Usually when they do that, it's because of bad writing, but here, the creative is firing on all cylinders, and it's just being let down by, I don't even know, poor planning? Why are they delaying all these things in the first place? Is it because they've underestimated how long it's going to take to have the bulk of the episodes fully animated? Or is it something else other than that? Is this some sort of planned hiatus? Regardless of what it is, I find it to be very annoying and very stupid. I know that the gap between the end of Season 5 and the beginning of Season 6 was pretty long to begin with. In fact, I think it was the longest off-season the show's ever had across its run. Despite that though, I think there's only so much momentum you can lose through an off-season. It's a given that this is going to happen, and since the show was already mega popular, I think it would have been child's play to bounce back after an even longer gap than this. As opposed to what we've gotten here. They've started the season, they had a number of episodes, and then they take multiple months off. For me, this is what really risks the show's momentum and goodwill. And I'm not saying the show is at any risk of losing its entire fan base or even coming close. I doubt it ever will. Right now, it really does seem like the show's idiot-proof. However, I do think that it had a lot of goodwill that has begun to dwindle. For starters, there is something I've noticed within the fandom. There's just a hell of a lot less discussion. It feels like people have started to care a lot less in a lot of ways, and it wasn't like this just a couple of months ago. People were hyped by the show and the story and crafting theories, and I was one of those people. The new season had so much story potential, and I was excited to see how it was going to play out. Then we had this delay, and it feels like it's very quickly dried up any interest in that hardcore online fan base. There is still discussion, of course, but it feels so much lesser than it was before. I personally haven't felt this disconnected from the show in ages. Hell, to tell you the truth, I don't think I've ever cared about the show less than I do right now, which is kind of sad. It's not that I'm angry about anything they're writing. I'm not out here making hate videos. I'm just not as interested in engaging with things as I used to be, and I don't have as much energy for making theories, discussions, or anything of the sort. Maybe the new episode will be able to rejig my interest, but it shouldn't take this long for something to happen to begin with. More than hate, I think apathy is the true risk to any sort of show, because at least hate is engagement, which means the show's still on your mind. It just isn't for me right now, and I think that's how a lot of other people have been feeling. In the peak fandom hype era, there was no rest. Even during the episode delays and the off-season when there was no fresh content, there'd be a huge amount of theorizing and video essays, posts and content flying around like hotcakes. A huge amount of engagement. In my anecdotal experience though, this particular off-season was already a decline in that. I feel like a lot of people had been turned off by the end of Season 5 and just rage quitted. The return of Season 6, though, brought it back to life like the green season in the Kalahari Desert. The rain came and suddenly everything was in bloom and filled with life, but then it all dried up and died off. But there's the difference. I feel like it wouldn't have died off so quickly in the good old days. And that's what's so doubly frustrating to me. Because we're getting good content, and you have a chance to really bring the fandom back to peak engagement, and then you fumble and you fumble hard. It's ridiculous. Like I said, it's not going to kill the show. I'm not delusional, but it's certainly killing off a certain demographic and turning them more casual than they ever were before. And once again, that's anecdotal, but it's my experience. Beyond that, though, it also just gives what remains of the fandom a lot of time to stew on things. And this can be good at first because they might be engaging with everything still and making theories and having discussions, but in my experience, the longer things are left, the more negative discussion will become. New content's dried up, and so people are going to be going over what we do have with a fine-tooth comb and nitpicking to their heart's content. Thus, you end up with people picking a story apart when previously, they'd liked it rather well. To me, this is why a long mid-season gap is so deadly. You've already had an off-season where the fandom had a content drought, and then you only give them a couple of episodes before it's right back to where they were before, a fresh drought. Whereas if you had a lot more episodes before a break, I feel like the fandom would be in a far better place because there's more to discuss to tide them over until the next wave of content. But that's not what happened, and I just can't help but shake my head. Of course, though, in the end, these are all my opinions, and they might not reflect the majority view. So what do you think about all of this? Do you think this long gap is just another bungling? Maybe you think the opposite. Is it a masterstroke and I just can't see it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.